All right, a lot of reaction pouring in after Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema announced she's leaving the Democratic Party and now becoming an independent. Senator Bernie Sanders says that Sinema's decision is likely due to politics he believes in her home state, not in Washington.
I think the Democrats there are not all that enthusiastic about somebody who helps sabotage some of the most important legislation that protects the interests of working families and voting rights and so forth.
Joining us now is Independent Senator Angus King from Maine, who first ran as an independent as the governor of Maine back in 1994. You've got another independent. What's your reaction?
My caucus just increased by a third. I don't know who's going to be chair. I mean, but when you have Sinema, King, and Bernie, that's a pretty broad section. But it actually says something because, there's a lot of speculation. Is she trying to avoid a Democratic primary? One of the problems with primaries today is that they tend to favor the activists on either side, Republican or Democrat. And so somebody who does reach across the aisle has trouble. You can lose your seat in a primary, not because of your position on immigration or any of those kinds of things. You can lose your seat because you're viewed as someone who talks to the other side. I have a Republican friend. He was facing a primary in the Senate. I said, what are they going to charge you with? You're conservative as hell. He said, they're going to charge me with being reasonable. Think about that for a minute.
And a question of Arizona, though, we talked about the makeup of the Senate, the structure, but in Arizona, if she does run for re-election, which she hasn't said she'll do yet, but if there is a three-way race between a Republican, a strong Democratic candidate, and Senator Sinema, does that complicate things for Democrats come 2024?
Of course it does. It'll be a complicated race because if you run as an independent, you either have to win or you're a spoiler.
Get handed to Republicans.
And that's the danger. That's the situation. But go back. Lisa Murkowski would not be reelected to the Senate. She's one of the best senators in my view. But it was ranked choice voting and this kind of jungle primary idea where everybody can run. It doesn't matter about party, because there used to be something like 100 balanced competitive House districts. Now they're like 10, where it's all Republican or all Democratic. And that's not good for the country. If people come to Washington afraid to talk about solving the problems, we'll never get there.
Well, but can we, because you mentioned the whole spoiler thing, right? Do we have somebody, Kyrsten Sinema, actually talking about that, criticizing someone for doing the exact same thing, Joe Lieberman, that she's doing? Watch this.
So what does that mean? Well, in the Senate, we no longer have 60 votes. Some would argue that we never had 60 because one of those was Joseph Lieberman. But that's whatever. And Nelson too, but really Lieberman. So now there's, I think as the president so eloquently said on Wednesday, there's none of this pressure, this false pressure to get to 60. So what that means is that the Democrats can stop kowtowing to Joe Lieberman and instead seek other avenues to move forward with health reform. And so it's likely that the Senate will move forward with a process called reconciliation, which takes only 51 votes.
So that's the whole point of having to appeal to, your party rather than doing sort of what you think is right. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong. But as I say, the issue is primaries, Don. About 20 to 25% of the members of a party vote in a primary. Who are those 20 to 25%? They're the activists, the people that are in the Democratic side more over toward the progressive, on the Republican side more over toward MAGA and the conservative. So somebody who will listen and talk. Kyrsten Sinema, you watch C-SPAN on a vote, and you'll see all this milling around, and she's around all over the hall. She's talking to Republicans, to John Thune and John Cornyn and Mitch and over the other side. And frankly, we need that kind of thing where we can reach some kind of organic group in the middle that can build out. All of these major things that we've accomplished this year, the infrastructure bill, the PACT Act, the Veterans Bill, the CHIPS and Science Act, all came from people getting together on both parties and building a consensus outward. And that's really, I think, the way it has to work. So I understand what she's doing and don't really criticize it. You can say, well, she's trying to avoid a primary. I think you have to look deeper than that and say, where are we with this primary system? If Lisa Murkowski had had to run in a Republican primary in Alaska, she'd be gone. And we would have lost one of our very best senators.
I liked this moment. You were on 60 Minutes, I think it was last year. It's quick, but I want people to watch what you said about being an independent. Here you were.
I have no automatic friends in the legislature, but I also don't have enemies. I have 186 skeptics. Yeah,
I liked that.
That's when I was governor, but I had to build every issue. I had to build my own coalition every time.
It goes to the question I had, which is, do you think many more of your colleagues should become independents?
I think that's a lot of where the public is. The problem is the structure is such that the two-party system really dominates how our everything is set up, how you get on the ballot. And the other part is, and I was fortunate running as an independent for governor of Maine because we'd had an independent governor 20 years before. So it was thinkable. The hardest thing for an independent is to convince the voters that they're not wasting their vote, that it's not, a flaky side
Spoiler
hustle.
to Don's point that it's actually.
Yeah, you got to convince them that you're for real. But I think, in my view, when I ran for governor, my view was that there's a road down the middle.
Right.
And we had just had a government shutdown. There, in Maine, the politics was very polarized. So I came in at my timing was very good.
Let's turn to some topics, if we could. Government funding and what the heck's going to happen. Would you agree that funding the government is one of the most important jobs of a sitting member of Congress?
You think? Absolutely,
Well,
of course
it's
is.
like I kind of ask in jest, but not really, because you guys, I'm not pointing to you, but the collective keep getting here.
It's ridiculous. I mean, September 30th was the deadline. Again, not to go back too much to when I was governor, we had trouble getting a budget one year, and the part of the legislature came to me and said, let's do a continuing resolution like they do in Washington. I said, not
No
on
way.
your life.
Right.
Once you open that door, it's just too damn easy. So will we get it done? Yes. Will it happen probably, I predict, Christmas Eve? A couple of days, in that area. It should have been done a long time ago. They're trying to agree on what's called a top line. Once they agree on a top line for defense and non-defense, then you can do the rest. What's happening? We passed a major veterans bill, and I think the negotiation is defense, non-defense, and veterans. In other words, put the veterans in a different category, and I think that may be helping them to get to a deal. The last I talked to people on Friday was they were close, but I think you outlined it, your reporter outlined it very well, that the Republicans basically say, look, we've had enough domestic spending, we don't need parity here. And that's where the argument
Okay,
is.
but I'm going to put you on the spot here, because if there is no agreement, would you support a one-year continuing resolution?
Well, I'd have to. I mean, that's the second worst outcome. The worst outcome would be a shutdown.
Right.
And if that's the option, but a one-year continuing resolution would be terrible. We couldn't fund Ukraine. We couldn't fund any of the new initiatives. We couldn't fund it would be terrible for defense. I'm on armed services. I can tell you it would be devastating for the military.
Another big thing that we've talked about is the Electoral Count Reform Act, which for people at home who are like, what? It's basically what Congress has been trying to pass that would prevent what Trump did, which was trying to take advantage of that and say what Pence's role was.
That's my highest priority for the next 2 weeks.
But the question is, if the Senate doesn't act on it by the end of the year, the process is going to start again. That means it goes back to the House. The House is going to be controlled by Republicans.
Won't happen. They've already said, I don't think the Republicans have the least interest in fixing the Electoral Count Act, although they ought to stop and think for a minute. I mean, one of the things we do in this reform is make it clear that the vice president doesn't have the power to throw out votes, which is what Donald Trump wanted Mike Pence to do. I don't think they've woken up to the fact that the vice president 2 years from now is going to be Kamala Harris. They ought to be on. This is a reform that ought to make sense to both parties.
Okay, so then why?
Why isn't it done?
Why isn't it done, and why the
Well-
tribalism on something that seems to make sense? It's common sense.
You're making too much sense.
Line of the
Washington
morning,
we're talking
Senator.
But no, well, the bill came out of this committee, the Rules Committee, 14-1. Mitch supported it.
Yeah.
All the Republicans except one. Guess. Can you guess who the one was?
Caitlin knows everything on this. I don't know.
Ted Cruz.
But here's the thing. That's what didn't the midterms show us that the American people want things done in Washington
Of course.
rather than just.
Of course.
So then,
And
why
I think
aren't-
we will get it done. I think we're going to get it done by the end of the year.
You do.
You do.
Oh, absolutely. I think it'll either be part of the budget. I think they're going to find a way to do it. Mitch McConnell wants it done. Chuck Schumer wants it done. Nancy Pelosi wants it done. I think we're going to. I think we're going to get there. I've been working on it for over a year, and this is it's one of the highest priorities. This is a time bomb underneath the democracy. This Electoral Count Act is such a mess and so subject to abuse.
No, that's a soundbite. A time bomb underneath the American democracy. Yeah.
It is.
We appreciate you
We know you got a train to Washington.
I do.
very much. We're going to get you out the
Thanks for
door.
By the way, real quick, you didn't get the memo.
What?
Oh, the
Because
tie.
He's wearing a tie, but I'll let you pass because usually people don't wear a tie, but that is the Constitution. So
It's the
fine.
Constitution, we the people, and you can get one at the store of the Library of Congress.
Thank you so
Senator
much.
Angus King.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Really
much.
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Senator.
Thank you.
Safe travels back to D.C.
All right.